Upcycling your clothes is way easier than you think, and I'm about to give you the ultimate cheat sheet to get started. If we haven't met yet, hi, I'm Natalia, and I love to inspire and empower you to build a more sustainable wardrobe through thrifting and sewing. So let's jump right into it. Before we actually start upcycling, we need to talk about tools. There's just a few that I feel are essential to get you started on your upcycling journey. First and foremost, a sewing machine. Now I know you can upcycle without having a sewing machine. You can use sewing tape or you can hand sew, but a sewing machine just takes it to the next level and opens up a whole new world of possibilities. And honestly, it doesn't even have to be expensive. You can borrow one from a friend. Facebook Marketplace is probably your best friend. A lot of people start sewing and then they give up or they get a new machine, and so they're selling them for super cheap. But if you don't want to buy one, a lot of local libraries rent them out to you. Once you have your sewing machine, the second tool is this. This is a seam ripper, and it's gonna make your life so much easier. Not only will you be able to take apart existing clothes, but you will also be able to undo your mistakes. And let's face it, we all make mistakes, especially when we're learning. Another one of your best friends will be these. These are your fabric scissors. Now I wanna make it really clear, fabric scissors can only be used on fabric. If you cut paper or plastic or anything else, they will simply betray you. Honestly, I just label mine, and if you do accidentally cut paper with them, they're really cheap, so you can easily replace them. Now that you have your tools, I really recommend that you start in your own closet. I know for a fact that you have a dress in there, a shirt, a pair of pants that you never wear, so why don't you start with those? Try to practice, make your pants into shorts. Turn a dress into a two-piece set. There's no pressure and it's free. Now on to number 2, we're gonna be talking patterns. What exactly are you gonna be sewing? We're gonna go back to your closet. You can easily trace your own clothes to create a pattern that you know is gonna fit you. This is super easy. My biggest tip is to make sure that you lay it as flat as you possibly can. And you also want to take into account, is it a stretchy fabric? Okay, if it's a stretchy fabric and I'm tracing it onto a not stretchy fabric, then I probably want to make it bigger. But if they're both stretchy, you can leave it the way it is. But most importantly, do not forget to add your seam allowance. The seam allowance is what gives you room to sew, because if you cut something out that you know it's exactly going to fit you and you don't have any seam allowance, then it's not going to fit you anymore because it's going to be tighter, right? So when you're starting, just add 1/2 inch to 1 inch to give yourself some wiggle room. Now let's talk about my favorite part, which is the actual thrifting. When you're thrifting, I have a few tips that'll make it a lot easier for you to upcycle. The first one is bigger is always better. Get your mind out of the gutter. I am talking about getting clothes that are a few sizes too big because it'll give you a lot more fabric to work with. For example, some of my favorite things to thrift are dresses and maxi skirts. Bed sheets are also an amazing option. It's so much fabric and they're honestly really cheap. Now, what exactly are you looking for in terms of fabric or these thrifted pieces? I would suggest that you try to find something interesting that's gonna inspire you, like a trim or a pattern. Let's say it has like a really interesting trim that you don't wanna use for this project. You can seam rip it and then use it for a later project. If you find a really cute pattern in a bed sheet or in a dress and you wanna turn it into pants, you can. There are no rules. Just let your imagination run wild. Honestly, most pieces that you find have some sort of potential. Now let's talk sewing. You have your setup, you have your piece that you're gonna sew, but how exactly are you going to sew it? I'm gonna give you 3 techniques that are gonna get you started and they're gonna get you far. The first one is the classic zigzag stitch and fold over. Most machines nowadays come with an overcasting foot, which basically allows you to seal off a raw edge. Because if you've ever cut fabric, you know that you can't just leave it like that. When you put it in the wash or even when you wear it, it's gonna start to fray and your piece will fall apart. So this is essential. The easiest way to do this when you're starting out is you do a zigzag stitch and then you fold it over and do a top stitch, and there is your hem. But there's some fabrics that are really delicate. So your next technique is going to be a rolled hem. You're basically going to, as the name says, roll it. So instead of folding it once and sewing it down, you're gonna fold it twice. There are some sewing machine feet that you can use for this, but honestly, I just do it by hand. The third one is elastic. Elastic is going to be your best friend. When you begin to sew, you're probably not going to want to get into zippers right away, so you can do elastic waistbands, you can do little ruching effects. The thing to note about elastic is that when you're sewing, you're going to want to pull the elastic as you sew. Let's face it, we all make mistakes, but the key here is to think before you sew. I know sometimes we can get really excited and just want to get into our project, but honestly, if you just take time to plan out your project, I love to draw and sketch things out on my iPad on a piece of paper. If you're thinking of a top you want to make and you draw it out, you're having to draw out the physical pieces that you need to cut and alter. So it's going to help you think through that process and also the order that you need to sew them. Honestly, that process is most likely going to change because things never go as planned, but at least you'll have some sort of idea of where you're going when you start. Speaking of thinking before you sew, pinning and ironing is going to be your best friend. Sometimes it sounds like a hassle to get out your iron and your pins, but it really will save you so much time. Not just seam ripping, but just in general. It really makes the process so much easier and it'll make it look way more professional. Let's talk about mistakes. Every single mistake that you make while you're sewing is a lesson. Sometimes things are not going to work out, and honestly, when you're starting or just always, you should just expect it to be ugly. Of course, nobody is trying to make something ugly, but if you don't put too much pressure on yourself, you will let your creativity flow and things will turn out so much better. And that is it, besties. That is your ultimate guide to upcycling. I really hope that this helped you, and I'm so excited for you to get started on this upcycling journey. Please send me pictures of the things that you make. If you want a really easy pattern to get you started, I have a free pattern on my shop for this bag. It is super easy and very flexible. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. It really helps small channels like mine. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and I will see you next week.